This episode is sponsored by Masterclass. Though it is really important to know stuff, Masterclass's world-famous instructors show you how to do what's important to you. When I set out to prepare for this podcast almost exactly 1 year ago, I knew in April 2020 that I needed to get better at writing. That's where one of my favorite authors, Malcolm Gladwell, came in. Masterclass makes it possible for me and others wanting to improve their writing to take a class from Malcolm Gladwell on writing at our own pace. You can watch, and in many cases listen to awesome instructors like Malcolm Gladwell teach you how to do what's important to you. You want to be a better cook? Gordon Ramsay teaches you how on the Masterclass platform. You want to learn how to act? Natalie Portman teaches you on the Masterclass platform. Grow yourself and support Forgotten Wars by trying Masterclass for the year using the link in our show notes. Learn how to do what's important to you from the experts. Now, to our episode.
This is Forgotten Wars.
Hopetown was a small, isolated settlement in the Cape Colony near where the Orange River and Fall River met. In 1867, a couple children of farm laborers found a small rock, and like kids normally do with rocks, played games with it. But then the kids noticed something different about the rock, so they brought it to their parents. Their parents noticed something different about the stone, so they brought it to the owner of the farm, Skalk van Niekerk. He gave it away casually to a handler of cattle, John O'Reilly. O'Reilly took it to a nearby village. All the merchants there agreed the stone was worthless.
Under the British flag, you will have everything you desire, but that flag will continue to fly over the land.
Over the land, maybe. Over the people, never. You will see me in the field, fighting for our independence, long after you and your party who make war with your mouths have fled the country.
I don't think the Boers will have a chance.
Disarm your blacks. Active part of a white man in a white man's war.
Civilized war is awful.
O'Reilly didn't agree. He took the stone to a bigger town where the local magistrate discovered that the edges of this stone could cut through glass, like a blade. The stone was mailed a couple 100 miles away to another town where a trained jeweler could inspect the stone. The jeweler announced that the rock was in actuality a 21-carat diamond. The diamond then traveled to Cape Town. There, the colonial secretary of the Cape Colony, Richard Southey, declared, quote, "This diamond is the rock upon which the future success of South Africa will be built." End quote. Diggers came from all over the world, the United States, Latin America, Australia, etc. The principal source of diamonds for the previous 150 years had been Brazil. That was about to change. Sigmund Freud is quoted in The Founder as once saying the following, quote, "A man who has been the indisputable favorite of his mother keeps for life the feeling of a conqueror, that confidence of success that often induces real success." End quote. If Freud is right, one of the most infamous characters in African history was fueled by his position as a middle child who had, at times, the undivided attention of an oldest child and the baby of the family treatment typically reserved for the youngest child. He enjoyed his mother's nearly undivided attention for 4 years. At the same time as a middle child with many older siblings, he had to develop some of the interpersonal, the political skills necessary to deal with siblings and parents. He had to learn to outwit those older siblings especially. I will be quoting primarily from the book The Founder as I introduce you to this British-born boy who tended towards, quote, strange fits of moodiness, some vague uneasiness of spirit whose source he was never able to communicate, unaware himself of whether it was melancholy or horror that seized him, end quote. Sometimes he would rock himself to and fro, and kept up a low crooning which was almost a moan, a crooning that never shaped itself into articulate words. His mother would wrap him in her arms, asking what the matter was, but he couldn't ever say what was the matter. He sometimes sat underneath the kitchen table and its draping tablecloth, clutching his knees to his chest, while family and household staff would search for him. When Cecil was born in 1853, Francis William, his father, was already 46 years old. As an Anglican priest, Francis William showed undisputed kindness and care to the poor and the sick in his congregation. He even was known for secretly giving the sick bottles of wine and even money. Unfortunately, Francis William did not show the same warmth and emotional availability to Cecil and his younger children, the last of whom he fathered at age 54. Cecil grew up a pale, sickly boy. As he grew near 17, Cecil considered his options. Cecil's aunt saw a nice life waiting for him as a priest, but Cecil saw no appeal in following his father's footsteps into the Anglican priesthood. Cecil didn't like his prospects as a military man. He really wanted to be an attorney. But then Cecil's older brother Herbert ventured to Africa, to the Natal colony, to get rich in cotton farming. Cecil Rhodes, the future co-founder of the De Beers diamond monopoly, made the 72-day voyage to Africa as a 17-year-old to work for his brother Herbert. Cecil had never worked with his hands before. When Cecil landed in Durban in September of 1870, Herbert was not there to meet him. The high prices that Natal's cotton could command were steadily declining in the face of predictions that the American South would not rise again as a cotton exporter for some time. Shortly after arriving in Natal, Cecil wrote home assuring his family that he would stick to cotton and resist the temptation to mine for diamonds. But hearing about the potential of diamonds from others made Cecil's mouth water. Diamond mining had really gained momentum after the initial discovery on Schalk van Niekerk's farm 4 years earlier. But for a time, Cecil didn't need to pursue diamond mining or his barrister dreams. He was happy to have land of his own, livestock of his own, and in his own words, quote, a lot of black niggers to do what you like with, apart from the fact of making money, end quote. He also could rest easy knowing he could take risks as a farmer because he could rely on his Aunt Sophia's support for at least 1 year. Cecil spent a month visiting settlers and missionaries, staying in Zulu homes, drinking Zulu beer, and beginning to feel at home in Natal. He was struck by the typical Zulu home, which he described as, quote, a beehive. One little hole as entrance, which you crawl in at, and once in you see all the Kafirs sitting on their haunches round the fire, which is lighted in the middle of the place. There is no chimney, and the entrance hole is wonderfully small, so that the smoke sometimes is rather overpowering, and you have to bolt for the entrance hole to get a little fresh air. Another objection is the fleas and insects. All night long, you are a scratch, 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 and then besides, you keep feeling the larger ones running up and down your body. But a Kafir hut is better than sleeping in the veldt. A very important piece of context for this word I will use as little as possible. Kafir. Kafir is originally derived from the Arabic word for non-believer or infidel. The word evolved in usage ironically to eventually be used to denote Muslims in South Africa. White settlers of South Africa would eventually use Kafir to refer to many people, practices, and things associated with black Africans. It was not a term of respect. When exactly Kafir gained its nasty racial slur status that it definitely carried through apartheid and carries today is debated. But for my listeners who are not African or are not familiar with the K word, it is a hugely offensive racial slur today in South Africa and Africa as a whole. It is a word so offensive in South Africa that those who use this slur publicly are subject to fines or even jail time. For example, one man received a fine and a jail sentence of a year for using the word abusively in 2014. There have been other similar instances. I'm going to take this digression even a little further for all my non-African listeners. We all know that the N-word is a nasty racial slur in the United States. Many of us also know that many black Americans, typically younger, refer to fellow black friends with a variation of the N-word ending in "a." They use this variation as a friendly term, not as a slur. To help educate myself, I asked members of an African history Facebook group if there is any friendly black African to black African variation of the K word. Some of my African listeners may be laughing right now at my earlier ignorance that this question helped eliminate. The answer from those members was a resounding no. There is no friendly Black African to Black African variation of the K word. For the remainder of the podcast, I will only say the K word if it is a crucial part of a quotation from our historical figures, at least crucial as I deem it. So now that we are all on the same historical page, we'll move on from my longest digression yet. Before Cecil Rhodes made his way to the British colony of Natal to farm cotton and live among the aforementioned Zulu, the geopolitical situation in South Africa had shifted numerous times. After the Sand River Convention of 1852 granted the South African Republic significant independence, and after the Bloemfontein Convention in 1854 did the same for the Orange Free State, both the new republics limped through many years of tumult and internal division. Sir George Grey, South African High Commissioner from 1854 to 1861, urged Lord Derby's British cabinet to bring the Orange Free State into a federation with the Cape Colony and Natal. The Orange Free State faced a costly war with the Sotho tribe and faced the South African Republic, trying to merge the two Boer republics together. So at the time, the Orange Free State was willing to join the British colonies in federation. But Lord Derby's administration refused to initiate this merger because it would cost the British taxpayer too much. How different history could have unfolded if the Derby administration had agreed to this merger. The Orange Free State still maintained friendly relations with the Cape Colony, even after a scuffle over diamonds. On the other hand, the South African Republic, the Transvaal, could not get its Boer communities to agree on one constitution until 8 years after the Republic's founding. Then the Transvaal descended into civil war from 1860 to 1864. Future Transvaal President Paul Crier's reputation continued to ascend during the Civil War. Then the British managed to anger both the Transvaal and then the Orange Free State. Just as the Transvaal was finding its united feet, the British subverted the Sand River Convention's non-intervention principles by hemming in the newly united Transvaal. Seeking to block Boer attempts to gain independent access to the sea, the British annexed territory north of the Transvaal and east of the Transvaal. This blocked almost all Boer access to the coast. Then diamonds were discovered in 1867. All of a sudden, Cape and Natal merchants were eager for the British to annex diamond territory that lay on the Cape Colony's borders. Fortunately for those merchants, William Gladstone's Liberal government took power in 1868. Proponents for a South African federation saw the Cape Colony as the key. By 1870, the Cape Colony was the richest region of South Africa and had more whites than the Boer republics and Natal combined, 237,000. If the Cape Colony could shoulder its own governance and security, this would allow the British to influence South Africa on the cheap. The newly discovered diamond fields sat in between the Cape Colony and the Boer republics. Beyond the Boer republics lived many natives who would prove to be the backbone of diamond mine labor. The Cape, Orange Free State, and Transvaal all argued they had the right to the diamond territory between them. Going against Paul Crier's advice, Transvaal President M.W. Pretorius agreed to let the British arbitrate this issue. Orange Free State President John Brandt argued that a neutral party from, say, the United States of America or the Netherlands should be the arbiter. It didn't ultimately matter what President Brandt wanted. The British assigned the Diamond Territory to the Klaping people. The Keat Award of October 1871 made the Diamond Territory into a new nation of Grietjie West. Grietjie West, home to about 35,000 blacks and 20,000 whites. Then, the British immediately annexed Grietjie West, further enraging the Boer republics. The British land grab was a clear violation of the Sand River and Bloemfontein Conventions. This diamond grab drove Afrikaners together. When the British immediately tried to get the Cape Colony to take over management of Grietjie West, the newly self-governing Cape Colony refused. They already had their hands full managing Basotho land beginning in 1871. Also, the Cape Afrikaners, the Cape Boers in government, wanted to stand in solidarity with their Afrikaner brothers in the republics. President Brant went to London and wrestled 90,000 pounds from the British. The next year, Brant led the Orange Free State into a closer alliance with their sister republic. The Transvaal and Orange Free State signed a treaty of friendship, trade, and extradition that year of 1872. If you would like to help keep Forgotten Wars producing and growing, would you do at least 2 of 3 things? First, would you share a link to the podcast with someone you think might enjoy it? Second, if you're listening on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or other providers, will you make sure to like or follow our podcast? If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, would you give us a 5-star rating and write a thoughtful review there? You can even do that while you're listening. Lastly, if you want more from the show, bonus episodes, behind the mic access, transcripts and sources, and much more, and you want to support the show, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/forgottenwars. That is patreon.com/forgottenwars. The link is also in this episode's notes. Thanks to those of you who have done one of these things already. Know that you're appreciated. Now, back to our episode. Having a diamond claim gave you the right to dig straight underneath your 31 by 31 foot claim. If a digger with a neighboring claim digs down much deeper than you, walls of dirt can start to form around them. Those walls will eventually collapse, creating 2 problems. First, the harder working digger could be buried beneath those collapsing walls of dirt. Second, even if no one is hurt, what about any diamonds that emerge from the rubble? Do those belong to you since the rubble was originally in your claim? Or is that rubble now your harder working neighbor's property? Basic economics created the other problem. The deeper you dig, the greater your machinery and labor costs rose. It would be too expensive for you to buy heavy machinery for your little plot of land. So consolidation came because consolidation was crucial. Who brought ultimate consolidation? Many of you already know. Back at the Rhodes farm in 1871, one of Cecil and Herbert's biggest problems were baboons. Every day, baboons raided Rhodes' corn until they were driven off. Rhodes wrote the following about these intelligent marauders who, quote, strip the cobs off and very quickly clean row after row. If you try to get near them, they go, being very keen of scent, and they always have a baboon posted as a sentinel. If they are scattered, they very quickly form into a rank with the elders in the rear, and into the bush they go. They strike you as being so like human beings. End quote. The Rhodes brothers' other problem? Herbert. Just before the harvest in late March 1871, Herbert left to try digging for diamonds again. 18-year-old Cecil Rhodes had to take charge of the most important multi-week processes of the year. He managed and paid his workers very well. He disagreed with the views of fellow farmers that Africans were the laziest race under the sun. Cecil found that his African laborers responded to economic incentives and generous employers the same as any white person would, with loyalty. Because Cecil lended money to his workers, some of them traveled from 20 to 30 miles away to work for him rather than other prospective employers with greater proximity. Cecil found Africans to be honest. He said that they were, quote, really safer than the Bank of England, end quote. If only Cecil had treated Africans with justice and humanity his whole life. Eventually, 18-year-old Cecil could no longer deny his desire for diamonds. He left the farm and arrived at the diamond fields in October 1871, just before the British annexed them and established Grietjie West. Upon arrival, Rhodes noticed many inefficiencies and processes. For example, for every 31 foot by 31 foot claim, 7.5 feet had to be used for a road. Rhodes quickly proved his ability as an entrepreneur and an attractor of powerful people like Charles Rudd, Francis Oates, Gardner Williams, John Hayes Hammond, and Alfred Bites, a name you will hear a lot later. In addition to mining for diamonds, Rhodes and Rudd made money selling ice, and later their British imported ice machines to miners. Whenever miners faced challenging circumstances, such as massive flooding of the mines, Rhodes was excellent at taking advantage of those changing circumstances. Rhodes and his associates bought out other mine claims on the cheap. They took almost any contract they could get their hands on, even before they had purchased equipment for the job. Rhodes' mortality confronted him as a 19-year-old in 1872 when he suffered what was probably a mild heart attack. He wrote his first of several wills after this attack. In his first will, he granted all of his belongings not to his family, not to his friends, but to the British Secretary of State for the colonies for the purpose of expanding the British Empire that Cecil so admired. Cecil's beloved mother would die the next year, though, bringing Cecil to break down uncontrollably to tears at a concert. But Rhodes and Rudd's businesses still hummed along to where Cecil was worth around £40,000 in 1876 when he went to Oxford again, leaving business in Rudd's hands. Cecil joined Oxford University's Apollo chapter of the Freemasons. During his induction into the Masonic order, he flew off the handle by babbling away about the mystic cult secrets of the 33rd degree after receiving criticism he deemed unfair. He didn't appear to take his Masonic membership or his academic studies seriously at Oxford. What he did take seriously were his opportunities to network, to socialize, to further formulate his purpose as an evangelist of the British Empire. He wrote in his 1877 Confession about the superiority of the Anglo-Saxon race, saying, quote, "If we had retained America, there would be millions more of English living. We are the finest race in the world, and that the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race." Cecil thought much of the world was still populated by despicable specimens, and desired to start a secret society similar to the Jesuits to bring, quote, "the whole uncivilized world under British rule. Africa is still lying ready for us. It is our duty to take it," end quote. His society would need to buy parts of the press because, in Cecil's words, "the press rules the mind of the people," end quote. He made another will within his confession that granted his wealth towards the aim of establishing his vaguely conceived secret society. He had no means to make this dream happen at the time. Rhodes and his business partners steadily built up the De Beers Corporation by consolidating control of nearly all diamond mining in Kimberley by the mid-1880s. Laws of economics made consolidation crucial. Think about it. The more diamonds that hit the market, the lower the price for diamonds. Rhodes and his business partners knew that they had to control the supply of diamonds so they could keep the supply artificially low so they could charge artificially high prices. Dr. Kenneth Vickery of North Carolina State University argues that the De Beers monopoly puts other monopolies like Microsoft or even Standard Oil to shame. One important measure that De Beers took to control diamond supply, closed compound mining. Entering and exiting the closed compounds where diamond mining happened was tightly regulated. Miners lived in the compounds. Miners were often lined up and searched thoroughly at the end of each workday for any smuggled diamonds. When I say thoroughly searched, I mean your armpits, any flesh wounds, and your anus being inspected. As a matter of fact, if your contract was up in a week, you had to take pills. These pills being laxatives. You took these laxatives too if your supervisors noticed that your bowel movements were getting irregular. That's right. Your supervisor literally tracked your pooping patterns. The sewage from these mining compounds were even filtered to make sure no diamonds escaped. It was predominantly blacks who had to live in these compounds. These compounds also allowed employers to wake everyone at once and have everyone on time to work, and to keep out any labor organizers from the outside. Whites typically worked as foremen in these compounds. But how did these mines attract the thousands of black natives to work in a prison-like setting? The answer is multifaceted. Before diamonds were discovered, the economy in southern Africa was almost entirely based on livestock and farming. Diamonds changed all that. The Cape Colony and Natal instituted or increased hut taxes on the Zulu, Pondo, and other tribes living within their borders. You couldn't pay these taxes with produce or livestock. You needed cash. Colonial governments used these taxes to drive more natives to leave their self-sustaining agricultural lifestyles to work for cash in the diamond mines. Some tribal leaders wanted access to European goods that began to flood the region, so they wanted their people to bring more cash into the tribe. Some blacks or tribes collectively saw an opportunity in diamond mine labor that terrified whites: firearms. Many tribes began to arm themselves with modern firearms with their hard-earned money, hoping to prevent further aggression against their tribes. Pass laws re-emerged as this black armament trend terrified authorities into rationalizing restrictions on the movement of black people. Boer republics and British colonies would try to disarm some of these tribes. That would have relevant ripple effects. What else would radiate ripple effects? The Cape Colony grew more powerful and wealthy because of diamond mining. British hopes that this colony could dominate a southern African federation rose, only to be dashed.